Right, let's dive right in.
Um,
Today, we're tackling a topic that I'm sure many of our listeners find particularly uh, fascinating and
mhm.
maybe even a little bit daunting,
Yeah,
especially if you're gearing up for the UPSC exam. We're
absolutely.
talking about the origins of World War I.
Yeah, it's one of those events
Absolutely.
that just seems to keep coming back. It's
Well,
it's history, but it's also like
it's right.
so relevant to today.
Yeah, and particularly in the international relations section of the UPSC exam.
Oh, for sure.
This is something that comes up time and time again.
Yeah, you got to know this stuff.
So we're going to try to untangle this web of
Right.
alliances and ideologies
Uh,
and give you a clear, concise, and hopefully insightful
yeah.
look at how this global conflict came to be.
So the source we're using for this deep dive
Okay.
focuses on what's often called the short 20th century,
It's a short 20th century.
which runs from 1914, the start of World War I, to 1990.
Okay.
And, understanding this period
Hmm.
is absolutely essential for grasping modern geopolitics.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really talk about the
It's
world today without understanding the events of the 20th century, right?
exactly. And this source, it doesn't mess around.
Well,
Like,
it jumps right in.
it throws you right into the deep end
It does.
with the sheer scale of World War I.
Yeah.
We're talking
Staggering numbers.
over 8 million soldiers dead.
Yeah. 8 million souls.
Another 10 million civilians lost.
It's hard to even fathom.
I know.
And that's not even including the devastating 1918 influenza pandemic,
Oh, right. The pandemic.
which was,
Exacerbated by the war.
exacerbated by the war.
Yeah.
It was a true global war
First one.
in every sense of the word.
Total war.
Total war that drew in nations from, every corner of the world.
Reshaped the geopolitical landscape.
Completely reshaped the world as we know it.
And what's fascinating is how it was also the first modern war
Right.
in terms of the technology involved.
We're talking about tanks,
Tanks, yeah,
chemical weapons,
chemical weapons.
strategic bombing.
Yeah.
All these innovations,
Yeah.
as horrifying as they were,
Right.
changed the face of warfare forever.
Absolutely. I mean,
It continued to influence conflicts.
they still do.
Even today,
It's crazy to think about.
yeah, it really makes you think about how one event,
Yeah.
the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand,
June 1914.
yeah, in June 1914,
Could trigger such a global catastrophe.
you have to wonder, right?
You do.
Was this truly the cause or just the tipping point?
Yeah, was it inevitable?
Or was it, just the wrong thing
Yeah.
at the wrong time?
And then you have these pre-existing alliances,
Right.
the Triple Alliance
A triple line.
of Britain, France, and Russia
Right.
on one side,
Okay.
and the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary on the other.
Right.
And this assassination,
Yeah.
it just set off this chain reaction.
Like a domino effect.
Yeah, of war declaration.
Pulling in all these other countries.
Like everyone's getting dragged in.
Yeah, you've got Serbia,
So-
Belgium,
Serbia.
Turkey,
Turkey.
Bulgaria.
Bulgaria.
Yeah, it's global. It's mind-boggling.
It's a tangled web.
It is a tangled web.
Yeah.
The source mentions how the Allies eventually won,
Yeah, eventually.
thanks in part to their industrial capacity,
Mm-hmm.
early adoption of mechanized warfare,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the crucial entry of the U.S.
Big factor.
But it also stresses that historians still debate
Oh, absolutely.
the real why behind the war.
They still argue about it.
Why did this
Yeah.
particular spark
Yeah.
ignite such a global inferno?
Like, what was it about this moment that
Yeah.
made it different?
Exactly, and that's what we're going to try to unpack today.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So the source highlights 4 main causes,
4 main causes.
each like a piece of a puzzle.
Okay, I like that.
We've got the German problem,
The German problem.
the Eastern question,
Okay,
imperialism, and nationalism.
big ones.
Okay, so let's start with this German problem.
All right, the German problem.
It sounds, I don't know, like something you'd see on a mechanic's to-do list.
Right.
Not the root of a world war.
Not exactly a geopolitical term.
What's the deal with that?
So one perspective, the realist view,
Okay.
points to Germany's rapid rise as a major power after unification in 1871.
Okay, so Germany's kind of new on the scene.
Relatively new.
New on the scene
Uh-huh.
as a unified, powerful force.
Right, and they're ambitious.
Okay.
And that makes people nervous.
Okay, so they're disrupting the the existing order.
Exactly, disrupting the balance of power.
So Germany's like the new kid trying to muscle their way into the cool kids' table. I like that analogy.
And the cool kids aren't too happy about it.
Yeah, nobody likes a show-off.
Right, exactly.
Especially when they start building a big navy.
Right, because then you're directly challenging
the
existing power structure.
Great Britain in particular.
Right, Great Britain being the top dog at the time.
Yeah, the big dog.
The big dog.
And they're not going to just sit there and watch.
No, of course not.
So you have this arms race.
Right.
Tensions are rising.
And it's not just about Germany's actual power.
No, it's also about how they're perceived.
Okay, so perception matters.
Perception matters a lot in international relations.
So even if Germany wasn't actively planning to attack anyone,
even if
the fact that others perceive them as a threat could have been enough to create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. That's the danger.
That's a little unsettling.
It is. Misperceptions, anxieties, all of that.
Can lead to bad decisions.
Oh, yeah. It can escalate things very quickly.
All right, so we've got the German problem.
Okay.
Let's move on to this Eastern question.
All right, the Eastern question.
What makes the Balkans such a historical hotspot?
Oh, well, imagine a region just simmering with ethnic and religious tensions.
Okay, so you've got a lot of different groups.
A lot of different groups.
All kind of vying for power.
Vying for power, vying for influence.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the decline of the Ottoman Empire.
Right, the Ottoman Empire, this once mighty empire,
huge empire,
is falling apart.
Grumbling.
And that creates a power vacuum.
A huge power vacuum.
Right, and everyone's trying to fill that void.
Russia's looking at it.
Russia.
Austria-Hungary's looking at it.
Yeah, it's a recipe for
disaster.
For conflict, yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like even without any outside interference,
even without,
this region was a tinderbox.
It was just waiting for a spark.
Ready to ignite.
Yeah, and unfortunately that spark was the assassination.
Right, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
It's like, you know.
It's tragic, but in a way, it's not surprising.
Not entirely, no.
Given the tense atmosphere.
Even the context.
Yeah.
It's almost like it was bound to happen.
Right, it provided the excuse, the trigger.
The catalyst.
Austria-Hungary sees an opportunity.
To assert control.
To assert control. They issue an ultimatum to Serbia.
That's right.
And then that whole system of alliance.
The dominoes start falling.
Kicks in.
Yeah.
Russia mobilizes to support Serbia. Germany backs Austria-Hungary.
Yep.
And suddenly you have a continental crisis.
It escalates so fast.
Yeah, and it just highlights how, even a seemingly isolated event can have these massive ripple effects.
Absolutely, especially when you have these rigid alliances.
It's like one wrong move.
One wrong move.
And everyone gets dragged in.
And the whole system collapses.
It's a stark reminder.
It is.
Of how interconnected the world was.
Yeah.
Even back then.
How fragile peace can be.
Yeah, very fragile.
It really makes you think.
It does.
About the choices leaders make.
And the consequences of those choices.
Exactly, and how those consequences can ripple out across the world.
Absolutely.
So we've got Germany vying for global power.
Right.
We've got a powder keg in the Balkans.
Yeah.
But there's more to this story.
There is.
Right.
The source also talks about...
We've got to talk about
imperialism and nationalism.
Yeah, these are the big ones.
How did these broader forces contribute to the outbreak of World War I?
All right, so you have Lenin's interpretation.
Lenin,
a Marxist.
The Marxist revolutionary.
Yeah. He argued that imperialism is basically capitalism in its most aggressive form.
So it's all about expansion.
Expansion, resources, markets, cheap labor.
Okay, so it's driven by this insatiable
hunger.
For more.
For everything.
Yeah, for more power.
More power.
More wealth.
More influence.
And this leads to competition.
Right.
Between the big powers.
Eventually war.
War, right.
It's almost inevitable in his view.
So from that angle, it was just a matter of time before these imperial ambitions clashed.
Yeah, like a train wreck in slow motion.
But you're saying it's not that simple.
It's not that simple, no.
Right. You can't underestimate the power of nationalism.
Nationalism's huge.
Especially when it's mixed with militarism.
And this sense of superiority.
Right. Like, we're the best.
We're destined to rule.
Yeah, our nation is destined to rule.
That kind of thinking.
And that makes compromise and peaceful coexistence very difficult.
Almost impossible.
Right, because you're not willing to...
You're not willing to give an inch.
To back down.
Nope.
Yeah.
So you have this really dangerous mix.
So while economic factors played a role.
They did.
Nationalism was this powerful driver.
Huge driver.
Of public opinion and government policy.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just limited to one country.
No, it was all over Europe.
All over.
It was this widespread
phenomenon.
So it's like everyone's caught up in their own nationalistic pep rally.
That's a good way to put it.
Egging each other on towards conflict.
Yeah, they're all riled up.
Right.
And the media's not helping.
Oh, right. You mentioned the media earlier.
Yeah, they're often portraying other nations in this very negative light.
So they're fueling the fire.
They are. They're emphasizing the differences.
Yeah.
They're fueling distrust.
And they're glorifying military strength.
Oh, yeah, making war seem glorious.
Right, instead of the horrific reality that it truly is.
Which it is.
So it's not just about governments making decisions in a vacuum.
No, public opinion matters.
Right, public opinion shaped by these media narratives.
By the information they're consuming.
Plays a huge role in creating the conditions for war.
It creates the climate.
And that makes you think about how media and information shape international relations even today.
Oh, absolutely. That's a key takeaway here.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. It's a lot to unpack.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we've got more to dig into.
So we'll dive deeper into all that after a quick word from our sponsor.
Sounds good.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the deep dive.
Yeah, please do.
And we'll be right back.
All right, so picking up where we left off.
Yeah, we were talking
this
about
whole complex mix of factors.
Yeah, all those ingredients in the recipe for disaster.
Exactly. You know, you have Germany trying to assert itself on the world stage.
Right, flexing their muscles.
Then you have the declining Ottoman Empire.
Leaving that power vacuum in the east.
And on top of that, you have
imperialism and nationalism.
Just sweeping across the continent.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. It's a lot to unpack.
And we're going to try to unpack it all.
We'll do our best.
To really give our listeners a good understanding.
Especially for those UPSC aspirants out there.
Right, because this is
crucial stuff for the exam.
Absolutely crucial for understanding.
International relations.
International relations, past, present, and future.
So let's break it down a bit further.
That sounds good.
Starting with that German problem.
Right, the German problem.
We talked about the realist perspective.
Right, the idea that Germany's growing power
upset the balance.
Disrupted the balance of power in Europe.
But it's not just about their actual power, you know?
It's about perception.
It's about perception, yeah.
How other countries saw them.
What they thought Germany was going to do.
So even if their intentions were, relatively benign.
Even if they weren't planning to conquer the world.
The fact that others perceive them as a threat.
It could have been enough.
Could have been enough to create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Because other countries start to react.
They start to take measures.
They start to arm themselves.
To protect themselves.
And that just feeds into the cycle of suspicion and fear.
And that could lead to miscalculations.
To bad decisions.
And ultimately to conflict.
And that's a really important point for anyone studying international relations, whether it's for the UPSC exam.
Or just for being an informed citizen.
Exactly. Perception matters.
It matters a lot.
More than we sometimes realize.
Because it shapes how countries interact with each other.
It influences their policies, their actions.
So let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about the Eastern question.
All right, the Eastern question.
We talked about this volatile region, the Balkans.
The powder keg.
The powder keg, yeah.
With the decline of the Ottoman Empire.
Creating that power vacuum.
You have Russia and Austria-Hungary.
Vying for influence.
Both trying to fill the void.
And then you have this incredible mix.
It's a melting pot.
Of ethnic and religious groups within the Balkans.
Many of whom are struggling for independence.
So even without any outside interference.
The region was already...
It was already a tinderbox.
Waiting for a spark.
And that spark, unfortunately, was the assassination.
Of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
And suddenly, Austria-Hungary...
seizes the opportunity.
To assert control.
Assert crackdown.
They issue an ultimatum to Serbia.
And that triggers...
the domino effect.
The alliance system kicks in.
Russia mobilizes to support Serbia.
Germany backs Austria-Hungary.
And we're off to the races.
It escalates so quickly.
Yeah, and it just shows how...
You know, even a seemingly isolated event...
this one assassination...
can have these massive ripple effects.
Especially when you have...
this web of alliance.
House of cards.
One card falls and the whole structure collapses.
So let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
And consider these broader forces.
Imperialism and nationalism.
We talked about Lenin's view of imperialism.
As the highest stage of capitalism.
Right, driven by that insatiable hunger for resources and markets.
But as we mentioned,
there's more to it than that.
You can't discount the power of nationalism.
Especially when it's mixed with
militarism.
And this sense of national superiority.
My country is better than yours.
And that makes compromise
very difficult.
It makes diplomacy very difficult.
It creates this climate of distrust and suspicion.
Where war seems like a viable option.
Or even a necessary option.
And we see that playing out
in the media of the time.
Right. You mentioned how the media was portraying
other nations in a very negative light.
Glorifying military strength.
And making war seem like this glorious adventure.
So it's not just about governments making decisions.
It's about public opinion.
It's about public pressure.
And the media plays a huge role
in shaping that public opinion.
In creating the conditions.
For war.
And that's something we should all be aware of.
Absolutely.
Even today.
Because the way information is presented.
It shapes how we see the world.
It shapes how we understand.
International relations.
So, understanding the causes of World War I.
It's not just about history.
It's about understanding the present and the future.
It's about recognizing patterns.
And understanding
the forces that can lead to conflict.
So that we can hopefully
avoid making the same mistakes.
Avoid repeating history.
And create a more peaceful world.
Well said. And on that note,
we're
going to take a quick break.
All right.
But don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back.
To finish our deep dive.
Into the origins of World War I.
Welcome back to the deep dive, where we've been exploring the intricate causes of World War I. We've covered a lot of ground, from the German problem and the volatile Balkans to the broader forces of imperialism and nationalism.
And, I think one of the key takeaways here is that even a seemingly isolated event like the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Right. It wasn't just some random ass.
It wasn't. It was a symptom.
A symptom of deeper tensions.
Exactly. And those tensions combined with
miscalculations,
misperception.
For fragile alliance system.
Yeah, it all created this perfect storm.
This recipe for disaster.
And it really makes you think about the choices leaders make.
The decisions they make.
And the consequences of those decisions.
And how those consequences can just ripple out across the world.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought.
It is. It really is.
But, this isn't just about looking back at history.
It's about learning from it.
Exactly. It's about applying those lessons.
To the world today.
So let's connect this back to you, the listener.
To our audience.
Especially those of you who are
aspiring diplomats,
policymakers,
future leaders,
those prepping for the UPSC exam.
What echoes of 1914 do we see in the world today?
Ooh, it's a good question. And I think one of the most obvious parallels
is the rise of new global powers.
Right. We're seeing that happening right now.
Shifting the balance of power.
Just like Germany did back then.
So, are there any potential German problems brewing today?
Are there nations whose ambitions are creating anxieties and rivalries?
It's something to think about, right?
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
And what about nationalism?
Oh, nationalism is still a powerful force.
In many parts of the world.
Sometimes it feels like it's on the rise.
And it can be dangerous.
Especially when it's combined with,
economic uncertainty.
Political instability.
Propaganda.
All of those things can fuel those nationalistic sentiments.
And make conflict more likely.
And let's not forget about technology.
Right. Technology played a huge role in World War I.
New weapons, new tactics.
And today, we're seeing even more rapid technological advancements.
In areas like cyber warfare, artificial intelligence,
autonomous weapon systems.
It's changing the nature of conflict.
In ways we're only beginning to understand.
So understanding the causes of World War I.
It's not just about memorizing historical facts.
It's about developing a framework.
For analyzing the world today.
For understanding the complexities of international relations.
For spotting those potential trouble spots.
For recognizing the patterns that can lead to conflict.
And hopefully, for preventing future catastrophes.
Because that's ultimately what it's all about.
It's about learning from the past.
So that we can create a better future.
Well said. And on that note,
I think we're just about out of time.
We are, but we want to thank you for joining us.
For this deep dive.
Into the origins of World War I.
It's a complex topic.
But we hope you found it insightful and engaging.
And we hope it's given you some food for thought.
And for those of you preparing for the UPSC exam,
we encourage you to delve deeper into this period.
Explore the sources we've mentioned.
Consider the parallels between the past and the present.
Because this knowledge
is not just about passing an exam.
It's about understanding the world around us.
It's about becoming informed and engaged citizens.
So that we can all work together.
To create a more peaceful and just world.
And for all of our listeners,
Whether you're studying for an exam or just curious about history,
remember to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive
we'll be back with more deep dives
into the events and ideas
that shape our world.
Until then, keep learning
Keep questioning.
and keep diving deep.